The ill treatment of the Jews was all the more saddening because many had fled here from Germany. Amongst them was a businessman called Otto Frank. He brought with him his wife and 2 teenage daughters, Margot and Anne, and got a job in a small factory on one of the quieter canals. For a while he thought his family was safe, but when war began and the Germans overran Holland, he knew it was only time before they would all be taken away to the concentration camps. Their only chance was to hide, and Mr. Frank knew of an excellent hiding place.
He told his wife and the girls to pack a few things. It wasn't safe to be seen in the streets with a suitcase, so they all wore as many clothes as possible. Anne packed her books and her curlers into her school satchel to avoid suspicion. Then they made their way here to Mr. Frank's office, where he told them to climb the steep staircase to the top floor.
Margot and Anne had no idea where they were going or why. Mr. Frank had thought it unfair that they should be asked to keep such a dangerous secret from their friends at school.
He led them in here, into what seemed to be a tiny box room. Then he took hold of this bookcase, which was full of files, pulled it back, and revealed a secret stairway that led up to 4 attic rooms at the back of the house that hardly anyone knew about.
Just as Jan Hartmann had built a secret church in his attic, Otto Frank had discovered a secret annex to hide in till the war was over. Another family, the Van Daans, and a Jewish dentist called Mr. Dussel were to hide here too. And Mr. Frank warned them all there would be many problems. In the factory below, people were still working, so any noise during the day would betray them. They could cook their meals on the old stove, but they could only use the lavatory in the evenings, when there was no one downstairs to hear the sound of it flushing.
Anne was horrified. She was a lively girl who liked to make plenty of noise. Only a few weeks before, it had been her 13th birthday. There'd been a party, and she and her friends had gone to see the film The Wonder Dog, Rin Tin Tin. There'd been lots of presents too, flowers and chocolates and books. Now Anne realized that there'd be no more parties, no cinema, no flowers or chocolates for a long time. All she had left were her books. Her favourite book was one like this. It was full of blank pages and had been a present from her parents. The idea was to use it as a diary, and Anne was thrilled. She began it straight away and wrote, "No one will be interested in the unbosomings of a 13-year-old schoolgirl, but I want to write." And she did, keeping her diary faithfully for the next 2 years. What she wrote in it was so moving that a film was made about it called The Diary of Anne Frank. This is Anne's bedroom today. She had to share it with Mr. Dussel, the dentist, but she was determined that it was really her room. She stuck pictures from magazines around the walls to brighten it up a bit, and her pin-ups are still here today, a bit faded after 30 years. Here is a picture of Princess Margaret and Princess Elizabeth, now Queen Elizabeth II. They were about the same age then as Anne and her sister. She also amused herself by drawing up a prospectus for the annex, pretending that it was a sort of hotel. A temporary residence, open all the year round, with free board and lodgings. But often she would just sit at the window all day, half listening to the old carillon of the nearby Westerkirk striking the quarter hours. At night time, even that was quiet. In the evenings, Anne wrote in her diary, "It's the silence that frightens me so."
It was in the evenings, too, that Anne would join the others around the radio set, hoping to hear good news of the war on the BBC Overseas Service.
A few hours ago, watchers on Britain's southeast coast saw large formations of Allied aircraft pass overhead, heading for France. Formations of fighters went out first.
Then on June the 6th, 1944, D-Day, the British and American armies landed in Normandy. For the first time, it looked as though the Germans might be driven out of Holland. Anne pinned this old school map on the wall and began to mark the line of the Allied advance. On July the 21st, she wrote in her diary, Now I am getting really hopeful. Now things are going well at last. Yes, really, they're going very well.
But 2 weeks later, Anne heard the sound she had always dreaded. It was the German police patrol.
Anne was escorted downstairs with the others, hustled into the van and taken to the station. There they were all put on a train for Germany. Tragically, it was the very last convoy of Jews to leave Amsterdam before it was liberated by the Allied troops. Only Mr. Frank survived the concentration camp. Anne died in March 1945, only 2 months before peace was achieved. When Mr. Frank returned to Amsterdam after the war, his Dutch friends told him that they'd rescued some papers from the annex after it had been ransacked by the German troops. Amongst them was Anne's diary. Mr. Frank read it with amazement. He knew only too well the horror and misery that his young daughter had endured for the last 2 years of her life. And yet her diary was full of hope for the future. He decided to publish it so that the whole world could read the brave words that she had written.
In spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart. If I look up into the heavens, I think that it will all come right, that this cruelty will end, and that peace and tranquility will return again.